Are we all ready, folks? Good evening, everybody. The West Hollywood City Council acknowledges that the land on which we gather, and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrieleño Tongva and the Gabrieleño Kizh peoples. This is Thursday, February 5th, 2026, 6:30 p.m. This is a meeting of the West Hollywood Planning Commission, and I will call the meeting to order. At this time, I'll invite everyone to stand and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Gillig, could we have a roll call, please?
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Commissioner Solomon. Here. Commissioner Hoopengartner.
Here.
Commissioner Harris.
Here.
Commissioner Edwards.
Here.
Commissioner Caballero.
Here.
Vice Chair Jones.
Here.
Chair Gregoire.
Here.
And we have a full 7-member quorum.
Next item is approval of the agenda. I would note that item 5B is a request to continue approval of the minutes for February 19th, 2026 to the next meeting, which will be March 19th, 2026. So if there's a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have a second? Commissioner Edwards, seconds. By approving this motion, we'll be continuing the minutes from February 19th, 2026. Let's go to a vote.
And the motion passes unanimously with 7 ayes, officially continuing the minutes for February 19th, 2026 to March 19th of 2026.
Approval of the minutes for February 5th, 2026. We have draft verbatim minutes before us. Are there any proposed changes? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's go to the vote.
And the motion passes unanimously with 7 ayes, approving the minutes, the verbatim minutes for February 5th, 2026, as presented.
Thank you. Public comment?
Chair, I have no public comment.
No public comment. Director's report. Director Marisic.
Good evening, Chair Gregoire, Vice Chair Jones, members of the Planning Commission, Nick Marisic, Director of Community Development. Earlier this week, the Council held a public hearing on the proposed Sunset Arts and Advertising project at 8222 Sunset Boulevard, the Chrysalis project, and by a vote of 4 to 1, approved the item consistent with staff's recommendation and the recommendation of the Planning Commission. The Council did request that staff share the required maintenance plan at a future Council meeting once it is approved by the Director, and so we will bring this forward as a future receive and file item. Also at the Council meeting earlier this week, we presented our quarterly report on major development projects. Back in June of 2023, the Council requested to receive these reports, and we've expanded them over time to encompass additional project types, such as those requesting approval under the Builder's Remedy provisions of state law, standalone billboard projects proposed under the SAP program, as well as to include information on the number of permit applications of various types and the average processing times. So as of February 1st, there are 21 major development projects in various stages of the city's development review process. This report reflects the addition of 1 new major development project since our last report, which was last fall, and that's a proposed 49-unit mixed-use project at 1134 La Brea Avenue. I also wanted to note that we are seeing most housing projects that are eligible for the new AB 130 statutory exemption from CEQA wanted to take advantage of that streamlined process, which, as you know, is part of a new state law that just took effect last year. This does place additional time limits on the processing timelines for planning entitlements for eligible projects, giving the city as little as 30 days for a decision to be made following the conclusion of the required tribal consultation process. And if AB 130 project is not acted upon by the city within the prescribed time limit, then it is automatically deemed approved under state law. In addition, the total number of standalone billboard projects in the Sunset Arts and Advertising Program has grown to 42 projects, which are either under review in permitting or construction or completed and operational. We have several projects that are actively making their way through the review process. We also have 11 new projects that were submitted under the resubmission process for round 2, which was opened late 2025 through the beginning part of this year. If you're looking for more information on that information that I just shared, all of those reports, attachments are part of the council agenda item that was presented earlier this week. And this concludes my report for this evening. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for a report. Any commissioner questions for the director?
Yes.
Commissioner Hubenkar.
I did receive, I got downloaded the RDEIR for 9160 Sunset and wanted to know when that would be on our agenda.
I believe the planning manager report will go through the look-ahead agenda item, but I believe it's scheduled for the next planning commission meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
We don't have any consent calendar items, and we don't have any public hearings subject to the Housing Accountability Act. We have one public hearing this evening. It's a zone text amendment regarding the state parking bill implementations. The Planning Commission will now hold a public hearing to consider a zone text amendment to update the zoning ordinance to comply with the requirements of Assembly Bills 1317, unbundled parking, and 894, shared parking, and remove minimum parking requirements citywide in alignment with the city's housing element and recent council directives. West Hollywood, California. Before we go to the staff report, any commissioner disclosures about public conversations? Hearing none, let's have the staff report.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jordan Parrish, contract planner with Rencon Consultants, supporting long-range planning. Tonight, staff is presenting 2 resolutions. A zone text amendment to implement recent state parking laws and eliminate minimum parking requirements citywide, and a companion resolution to clarify the city's VNT screening criteria under CEQA following elimination of these minimums. This ordinance implements 2 recent state laws. AB 894, which requires cities to allow shared parking of underutilized spaces between uses, and AB 1317, which requires qualifying new residential projects to unbundle parking from rent. In addition, the ordinance implements the May 5, 2025 Council Directive to eliminate all parking minimums within the city. While AB 2097 already eliminated minimums for most uses in most of West Hollywood due to our proximity to high-quality transit, this amendment codifies a complete elimination of all parking minimums for all uses within the city. Finally, the second resolution corrects a technical issue in the city's 2020 VMT guidelines. Without this clarification, any project that voluntarily provides parking could unintentionally trigger unnecessary VMT analysis. These state laws were adopted to reduce the overconstruction of parking. Parking construction can cost between $45,000 and $96,000 per stall in 2025 in the LA area, a substantial portion of per unit construction costs. Excessive parking requirements unnecessarily increase housing costs, reduce project feasibility, and subsidize car ownership by bundling parking into rent, even for people who don't use personal vehicles. This ordinance also aligns with West Hollywood's general plan, housing element, and climate action goals by removing hidden parking subsidies, allowing shared use of underutilized parking, and rethinking curb space and parking assets within the city. In practice, these changes will have limited immediate impact because nearly all parcels and most uses in the city are already exempt from parking minimums under AB 2097, and unbundling parking is already common in the Los Angeles region. This map shows 4 small areas with approximately 38 parcels that fall just outside high-quality transit areas, which are shown with the light blue overlay. These 4 areas are not currently impacted by AB 2097, but will have their parking minimums removed under this ordinance. Note that parking can and will still be based based on operational needs, rather than on prescriptive one-size-fits-all formulas that are not responsive to evolving conditions. In conclusion, this ordinance implements AB 894 and AB 1317, incorporates the May 5, 2025 Council Directive to eliminate parking minimums citywide, aligns the municipal code with state law and city policy goals, and clarifies the city's VMT screening criteria to avoid unintended CEQA triggers. Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt both draft resolutions. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for your staff report. We don't have an applicant this evening. In past practice, I've liked to go straight to public comment because sometimes I think the public comment can help inform our own questions of staff. Unless anyone objects, I'd like to ask Mr. Gillig if there's any public comment on this matter.
We do, Chair. Our first public speaker will be Helen Krieger, to be followed. I'll just state your name and city of residence, please. You have 3 minutes.
Helen Krieger, City of West Hollywood, and I'm speaking here as a resident of West Hollywood personally. I want to speak in favor of moving staff's recommendation on all of the points, including removing the parking minimum citywide for that less than 1% that doesn't already fall under AB 2097. And I understand for some people the idea of removing parking minimums is kind of scary, but it doesn't mean that developers can't build parking. It just means that it doesn't even actually say that there's a limit to how much parking they can build. They can build as much as they want if you guys pass this. It just means that we're not giving them, we're not demanding the kind of parking that they need to choose. They can let the market decide that. It gives them and it gives us options. So developers have the options depending on what kind of housing they want to build, what kind of demographic and price point they're targeting. If they're building lower priced housing where they expect a lot of the tenants might be younger people who might not have cars, if they want to build smaller units, lots of smaller units at a lower price point, then this lets them do that. And to be clear, we do really need a lot more smaller units at lower price points right now for young people that want to move into the city. And a lot of developments will probably still decide to have some parking depending on the market that they're targeting again, because they have to answer to their investors, their banks, their private equity. Even if it's a nonprofit, they're going to have to answer to funders and grant sources. So it's in their interest to figure out a realistic amount of parking that they'll need, but it'll be based on the market and not based on arbitrary laws that we set for them. But way more important than giving developers options is giving us residents more options. So if you don't have a car, or if you value having a lower priced apartment more than having a car, then this lets developers build more of the kind of apartments that give you that option. It puts housing people ahead of housing cars. Parking costs a lot of money, and right now we're using housing to subsidize the cost of parking. The average cost to build underground parking, which is what you have to do in a dense urban environment like West Hollywood, it's about $73,000 per space, and that doesn't include land costs. So those costs get passed on to the tenants. The estimate is that a parking space costs tenants about $200 a month. So you should really get a choice as a tenant if you want to pay for that or not. And if you hate everything about what I just said and you would never ever rent a place that doesn't have a parking space, the good news is that you don't have to. No one is ever going to force you to buy a house or to rent an apartment that doesn't have a parking space. But what this does do is let other people have some different options too. I've heard some people say this is going to force lower income people to live in apartments where they can't have a car. And I would say I would rather have there be a lower priced apartment available for somebody to live in than to have that person have to live out of their car. We're a community that cares about affordability and having a diverse population who can afford to live here. That's one of the values that the city was built on, and removing parking minimums is one of the very few levers that we as a city have to get there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have our last speaker, Anita Goswami.
Hi there, Anita Goswami. I'm a resident of the city of West Hollywood. A couple of things, and you know me well. One item is just in terms of anything that the Planning Commission is looking at regarding parking and mobility, I just ask, has the Transportation and Mobility Commission also been aware of the item? And perhaps, have they reviewed that item? And that is just something to consider. I know staff is already, or must be speaking with the Transportation Division and the staff level. I simply ask whether the Transportation and Mobility Commission is also been involved with that. That said, I'm sure you know my views on parking. My issues are really with the state laws that are driving this, because parking is a key element of livability, especially here. I know we want to go to fewer cars. My husband and I did that. We've reduced the cars that we have, and I certainly use a lot of public transportation and walking. So actually, I do encourage all of that. But again, just from a livability, I think we need to acknowledge that parking is important. One of the things I do like is that there is more shared options. Just really it was interesting going through the code, kind of removing some of the little nitpicks of that limit that shared parking and that limit some of those restrictions before. Because yes, we should be absolutely doing more to share parking, more to encourage sharing this. And the example given in the staff report was obviously office buildings, but I think this can be done a lot also with restaurants that are sharing, some that are open during the day, some that are open at night. So I think there's just a lot of options there where we can positively work together to improve both that livability and the visitability of people that want to come to West Hollywood and play and eat here and have fun here and all of this. Let's consider that as part of the livability too. So just wanted to go ahead and say all of that as you look at what is pretty much a simple decision. Thank you again.
Thank you, Chair. That is our last public speaker for this item.
Thank you all for your public comment. At this time, I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. And let's move to commissioner questions of staff. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Edwards.
In the packet, we received some feedback, and the question was raised, is will this, what the changes are, will it, somebody has a rent-stabilized apartment and they have a parking spot, and the owner decides to become a condo. How does this apply to that project?
So this change doesn't impact the state laws that already exist to protect against displacement, as well as the local laws. So in those circumstances, the property owner would still be required to go through the normal channels to, and it would be subject to the same restrictions that currently apply. So it could be things like relocation assistance or notification timeframes that they have to abide by, right of first refusal, being required to replace affordable units, things like that. So there are already state laws that apply to that, and they would still apply.
Well, okay, now I better understand. Okay, so what I'm hearing, what this person who wrote in is saying is that if under the old rules, they had to provide 20 parking spaces. So if they decide to become a condo, then they don't have to bring it up to code. They can, their understanding is that the 20 would no longer be required, and that they can just make out whatever they want as to how much parking they provide. So if they had 20 parking spaces and they went to a condo, would they only have to provide 10? I mean, that's really the question, so I couldn't really answer the question in my head, so I just wanted to throw it out there and see what y'all thought.
Yeah, for conversions like that would not be required to provide any additional parking anyways. So it's really difficult to really understand what the core issue was, but changing from one type of residential use to another,
Yeah.
With a conversion wouldn't necessarily say that we would require additional parking. So
Okay.
By eliminating the parking requirement, really won't
Okay.
have that much impact on the parking required for a conversion.
I just want to get on the record to hopefully allay this constituent's fear that this change would impact this person and create a situation by which they would get pushed out.
Yeah, it'd be difficult to venture what exactly the main issue was, but
Okay.
yeah,
No, that's helpful. I couldn't answer the question myself, so I threw it out there.
we think that was a concern. Right?
Okay.
Commissioner Upengar.
To follow up on that, so under our current code, I think it's like, one bedroom, one parking, et cetera. There's an apartment building across the street from me that I know that the owners there wanted for years to convert to condos, but they didn't have enough of the required parking. Is that saying that now they could convert even though they don't have enough parking?
If they're located in one of the areas that were shown on the map to already be subject to AB 2097, they're already, those parking requirements have already been removed. So if it were in
Even
one
though
of,
it's built long before 2025?
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I think the provision in the code that we're talking about here is that conversions from multifamily rental buildings into a condo, there's a section in the code that requires them to be in conformance with existing standards. And so that is correct, that would no longer be a requirement in that conversion. Other standards that are existing in the multifamily development standards in the code would still apply, but since the parking standards are no longer there, they would not apply under that provision. Does that make sense?
I think so. Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on your question, so go ahead.
Oh, it just, so you're saying that prior to this zone text amendment, existing state law already said that since it was unbundled, that if they were converted to a condo, it didn't have to, today's standards say that they don't have to meet some new requirement for more parking because it's already been unbundled through previous state law.
So yeah, I think the unbundling is sort of one of the components, right? We have unbundling, we have shared parking, and we have just the elimination of the parking requirement. So yeah, based on AB 2097, no new parking is required if you're within the high quality transit area, except for like those 38 little parcels that we were just mentioning. So yes, as of that law, no new parking is required.
Who would like to go next? Commissioner Solomon.
So AB, as I understand it, AB 2097, the applicability of it is broad if you're within the half mile, but it's not absolute. There are a couple of exemptions for when you still there are a couple exceptions for where the state law doesn't apply. I think one is a hotel project. Another is about proximity to a high severity fire zone. I think regardless, my question is, are we eliminating minimums in those 4 areas on the map to be congruent with what 2097 already provides, or are we wiping parking minimums off the map, no pun intended, entirely in West Hollywood?
So in this case, because the elimination of parking minimums is a response to the council directive, which did ask for a blanket elimination of parking minimums for all uses in the city.
So that would include hotels?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Upengar.
That's not what I read in the staff report. So I thought that just included those four areas, not the exceptions for hotels and the other things that were in the state law.
Yes, so the city council directive asked specifically to remove parking minimums for all uses across the whole city. So that map just illustrates where AB 2097 already applies.
Okay.
Commissioner Harris.
Yeah, I was going to hop into this conversation about condo conversions. My understanding was that the question was about, and I could be wrong, but I guess this is what occurred to me when I read the comment. When a parcel map is created, that the parking is part of the map. It's attached to the unit that the parking is assigned to. Is that? But the overall, I don't think that changes the requirement of whether a condominium has to include a parking space, right? Like, you could build a condo building today if you're in an AB 2097 qualifying area and not have parking for that condominium use. Okay, great.
Correct. Yeah.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Ungar.
I'd like to clarify the shared parking, how that would work. Does that mean that now commercial parking could move into residential neighborhoods?
Under state law, yes. It means that property owners can share their parking with other entities, and that does include commercial uses, per state law.
Okay, and how does it work in that if a building owner has rented out all of their parking, it's simply that the next renter who wants apartment and wants parking simply just doesn't have it. Is that correct? Until such time as a space becomes available.
So tenants get right of first refusal if there's parking available.
If.
Yes.
And if there's not?
Then they wouldn't have parking accessible at that site.
So a landlord could opt to make a premium dollar by renting all of their residential space to a commercial entity and not provide any residential parking for their renters. Is that correct?
Yes, under state law.
Okay. On page 5,
Of the resolution?
No,
or
of
the-
your staff
the
report.
Oh, the staff report, okay.
In talking about the minimum applicability, you're saying it applies only to residential projects with 16 or more units that received a C of O on or after January 1 of 2025, and does not apply to 100% affordable housing. With few qualifying projects anticipated, there's limited evidence of near-term cost impacts for income-restricted households. But we just approved a project on Santa Monica at the bond that had, 20 affordable housing units? And there's many more in the pipeline. So I'm not understanding where you're saying there's limited impact to income-restricted households, because those are all income-restricted households. So I don't know, can you explain that statement?
I think that statement was an attempt to contextualize the impact. And I think that the statement that follows it later, that we will be monitoring the situation, is also meant to address maybe some uncertainties in that statement.
Because there's the bond, there's the B of A building, there's Fairfax, there's La Brea, there's any number of projects that are far in excess of 16. So I'm really trying to understand where this limited evidence of impacts on income-restricted housing comes into play.
When we were first researching that issue, we thought it might apply retroactively, and so would it mean like suddenly a lot of low-income households in the city would have their parking increase? And so compared to that, it seems more limited, but I understand what you're saying, that it will still impact households.
I mean, just the projects that I'm talking about is quite a few. Okay, interesting. Mobility alternatives on page 6 then goes on to say that, yeah, we have multiple high-quality transit corridors, and, you know, we have high walkability scores, and we have expanding bike infrastructure, and all these mobility options. Did staff look at the percentage of our population that's disabled? Do you know what that number is?
I don't know what that number is off the top of my head.
What about the number of the percentage of our population that's senior?
I don't have that information on me.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because when you say that there's all these mobility alternatives, that implies that someone could avail themselves of those alternatives. And so I'm wondering what percentage of our population has no ability to avail themselves of those alternatives. Because I think it's important that we understand what we're really talking about here. And I didn't look it up myself because I don't know where I would get that information, but to me, it's not a small number, especially to a city who continues to talk about aging in place and encouraging aging in place. Okay, because you go on to say, based on these factors, staff is not recommending parking price restrictions. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions that you've made here that says, oh, it's not going to impact the affordable, and it's not going to impact the aging, and it's not going to impact the disabled, and we're now chalking up a few chunks of the population of the city, and you're saying it's not going to have an impact, and so therefore you're not recommending parking price restrictions. So at what point are you, and how would you be monitoring that? I mean, do you have a plan in place to how to monitor it so that going forward we could maybe say, gee, this isn't working, and how can we help people?
I think we could formulate a plan to do so in the future.
I would think that would be helpful. Let's see. On page 8, I'm trying to understand this modified VMT framework. It starts on page 7, it says, under this modified framework, projects within a half a mile of a major transit stop continue to be presumed to have less than significant impacts on transportation unless one of these exceptions applies. The project has an FAR of less than 0.75. I'm really confused as to how a project that's less than 0.75 has less than significant impacts. Shouldn't that be more than 0.75?
I believe that these specific regulations are based in state guidelines. So this is taken from state guidelines. I'm not sure how the state came to that number, but I would probably presume if you're looking at a development that has a lot of single-family homes where people will need to drive, I think that's what this is for. But this is based in state guidelines, so I couldn't say what their reasoning was.
I guess even the language of it seems, projects within a half a mile of major transit will have less than significant impacts on transportation unless. So if they have less than 0.75 FAR, they have more VMT impacts? Is that just because there's more cars? I don't understand how. I mean, certainly in our little town, first of all, everything is more than 0.75 FAR, and by definition, the more FAR, the more impact. So this seems completely cattywampus.
Sure, I can try to explain. I think it's first important to note that this isn't changing. This is something that was already adopted by the council in 2020. But if you think about vehicle miles traveled, it's sort of the opposite of when you think about level of service. And so we're talking about an underutilized property that is built not to its maximum FAR capacity or even close to it because it's less than 0.75 FAR. In that bubble around a high-quality transit stop, we want to have uses that have employment opportunities and housing so that people can use transit and or walk to those things and not have to drive in from somewhere else to do so. So that's what's reducing the vehicle miles traveled, and that's what reduces the impact. Does that make sense?
I guess.
It's just one of the screening factors. It's not a threshold. It's just saying that if something is small compared to what would be allowed on that site, that's a flag to us that we should look at it. It's not necessarily saying there's an impact. It's saying that that's something we should examine to see if it might have a VMT impact.
It just seems completely counterintuitive, but if that's state law, that's state law. I mean, I think so much of state law is written for not us. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Cavallero.
Okay, so I was a little blown away by the high-level presentation, staff presentation, because I think I got way into the weeds of the staff report. And picking up on where Commissioner Hoopengardner left off, just one very simple question. How is the city dealing with these impacts on our community? For instance, our climate action plan. We have no more parking, which means we have no more electric charging stations in those buildings. Is the city taking anything into consideration as to how we're going to potentially maintain our green action plan and have electric stations throughout the city?
Yes. Two-pronged approach to that.
Yeah.
So the first prong. So if folks do decide to provide parking, so even one additional parking
Only
space
if they do.
If they do, then they are required to provide both ADA required parking and the EV infrastructure if they're required as required per our building code. So that's one thing. The city is also kind of separately on its own going through an EV charging infrastructure plan implementation. So right now we're sort of building up our EV infrastructure throughout the entire city. So as of now, we have some new infrastructure charging, or some new charging stations coming online with all the new design district streetscape projects that are coming along. And then additionally, the city is currently in negotiations with a company to provide additional on-street charging throughout the entire city, not just in the design district. So that's being negotiated at the moment as part of sort of this larger EV charging infrastructure plan. So that's in motion now. It's just taking a little bit to get there.
Okay, that helps. Then there is also the issue of the 2,000-foot distance from a home to a potential parking space. Like, what are we doing to make sure that that path, if you're not being picked up by a van provided by the city, are we making it ADA compliant? How are we making it safe for someone arriving at home at 1 o'clock, or arriving at their parking space at 1 o'clock, and they have 2,000 feet to walk, at 1 o'clock in the morning, and they have 2,000 feet to walk to their home? How are we making that a safe experience for our residents?
So the existing state and federal ADA requirements would still apply in this case. So I think that would be the first step in addressing that.
So we would look at making all our sidewalks ADA compliant and bump free, and we will need to do that.
Yes, and we do that already. Yeah.
Okay, so this could actually trigger some of those improvements potentially.
Yeah, along with some of the improvements that we already have as part of sort of like the city's capital improvement program.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, just to add, we also routinely kind of have a citywide ADA compliance review, and so I think we're doing that at the moment as well. And so there are additional recommendations for accessibility improvements throughout the city, and some of that can include some of the sidewalk enhancements or crosswalk enhancements and lighting, for example, that might contribute to enhance that experience.
So areas that are not to code could become to code given some of these, some of what might be implemented as part of these changes.
Yes, but we hope that most of the city's already per code. But yes, some of these enhancements would definitely help.
Okay, I mean, I know that it's not, but I'm happy to hear that. And then the other thing is like, isn't the unbundling, so how is the city going to be managing the unbundling of, say you're paying $4,000 a month for rent and you have a parking space, and then they unbundle it? And how are we going to be able to understand if the owner is actually making that $4,000 per month rent, $3,800 per month rent, or keeping the $4,000 per month rent on the unit and just charging an extra $200? Are we going to be able to control that at all? Or is anybody thinking about that? Or
Yeah, no, right now we're not. And so yeah, because of the way that the regulation is structured, for the unbundling, we can't put any more restrictions than what is already in there, and for the city to keep track of the number of unbundling transactions that may happen, we just wouldn't be able to know even how to track all of that. So as of now, there's no way to really manage or oversee that program.
okay, I mean, I'm okay with the ZTA the way it's presented, but given our last two planning commission meetings and sort of quality of life and all those issues came up, this kind of triggered all those kind of questions for me. So like the unbundling, I get it, but we keep on talking about having more affordable housing, and I'm just thinking, I can just see that landowners just, it's like, no, your rent stays the same, but I'm going to charge more for this parking space. And I understand that we might not have the facility to track these things, but should we put those facilities in place potentially? Is my question. So, and let me see if I have any other. Oh, yeah. So in terms of business longevity, and say a business is renting 10 parking spaces from a residential building, like the example we used earlier, and that residential building is demolished and a new building is built with no parking. What are we doing to make sure that that business stays viable? If they are dependent on those 10 parking spaces, will we be helping them find 10 new parking spaces? Has anybody thought about that potential impact?
So there's two different scenarios here that could happen, that would apply here. So one would be that it was voluntary parking that was being provided. In that case, it would be completely up to the business owner and the owner of the residential property to negotiate the terms of the lease, right? So that wouldn't be something that the city would administer. That would strictly be between a business arrangement between those two parties. If there were an instance where there was some special circumstances where there was required parking for that business, then part of the parking agreement that would have to be approved by the city in that circumstance would include terms that would address for that very situation of ensuring that they would have that availability.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions right now.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, just a suggestion with regards to the unbundling. I would imagine that, I don't know, it would be under rent stabilization or however communication we can provide, is that something goes out to all the renters that says, this is what the changes have happened, and this is, right now you have an agreement and you have parking, so the parking is built into your agreement, or they might have it as a set aside where you pay $200, and so if anything changes, here's where you can go get information. Like, here's a resource. I think that would be a strategy to help address the concerns that were expressed. I don't know if that's something we could put into the record or how we have to follow up with to have that conversation.
Well,
but that's a way that can, as a strategy, I'm just throwing out there.
Yeah, from my understanding is if in a rent stabilized building, if you're a tenant and if parking is actually part of one of the amenities that is provided to you, that cannot be removed without, negotiation and without having to go through, a lot of hoops in order for that to be taken away. So that's a protection that's already sort of baked into our rent stabilization ordinance. So it'd be very difficult for that to happen. We can, work with our rent stabilization partners to disseminate some of that information. From my feel, even a lot of property owners don't know that this law is in effect. So, the more that we advertise it, the more that they'll also find out about it. Not that we don't want to be transparent, but, the more that it's highlighted, the more that folks might be aware that this is an option that they can undertake.
And then follow up to a previous conversation around the VMT 0.75. This might be out of left field, but for my clarification, is that almost something that's similar to what used to exist before Prop 13, which is taxes used to be based on commercial property on next best use? So this kind of incentivizes and says that this could be incentivized to build something that's more aligned with the zoning. I don't know, just throwing it out there.
Potentially, you're right.
Vice Chair Jones hasn't had a chance to ask questions.
And I'm going to sneeze. I'm having a terrible allergy attack in here. I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. I'm blowing my nose. I'm verklempt. Okay, so by the way, this is the sexiest any of you are ever going to hear my voice. So just letting you know. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm clear on the language about 100% affordable housing developments. This is end of page 3, end of page 3, middle of page 4. So it says that some properties are exempt from these provisions, including, in the second bullet point, there is 100% affordable housing developments. Are the affordable housing developments exempt from unbundling parking, or are they exempt from the eviction portion of this section?
They're exempt from unbundled parking.
Great, okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I'm
If
clear.
that's unclear in the way it's structured, then I can review that and make sure it's clear.
I might, it wasn't totally clear to me. I might be the only one, but I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Okay, thank you.
Can you just let me know the section number? I'm using a different document.
Sorry, I'm on the staff report. I'm on page.
Oh, okay.
It's not the reso. Yeah,
Oh,
it's not the
okay.
resolution.
Okay.
It's just the staff report. It's just a point of clarification for me. I also wanted to ask, and this may be a little generous, and I don't assume people would do this, but could a property owner or a landlord theoretically unbundle the parking and offer that parking at no cost? Like if you had an apartment and they're like, it's unbundled, but your invoice every month is $0. Again, I don't assume that anyone who owns parking spaces in LA would be doing this, but I do want to ask, I'm just curious to know, are they required to charge a fee?
I don't think there's anything in the state language that requires them, that has any kind of price controls in that regard. So
Right.
I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think hypothetically they could charge $0 for an unbundled parking space.
Right, and again, just to reiterate what's in the staff report, staff is also not recommending any pricing restrictions or guidelines. Not like it shouldn't exceed XYZ percentage of rent or anything like that.
Yeah, not with this ordinance.
Okay, those are my questions for now, thank you.
Commissioner Solomon.
Thanks. I had a few clarifying questions about Title 19, Section 56. So if you go to the red line, which is Exhibit C, Starts on page 14 of 19. We've had some discussions in our last two meetings, brought about by me, about whether or not new construction projects in a parking district are eligible for those future tenants to be able to apply for street parking permits. This Title 19, Section 56 makes a lot of reference to off-street parking in both minor use permits and major use permits, but I was wondering if you could clarify how what is being proposed here in these changes, how does that relate to the discussions that we've had lately about street parking for new projects?
Can you, what page number was that again?
I'm on
Sorry,
Exhibit
Commissioner
C,
Selden.
and it's page 14 of 19. Exhibit C is the red line.
Oh, I see. 13,620.
Section 56.
Okay, and the question was with regards to a previous project? that came in?
So I guess to back up, we've instituted conditions of approval for new housing projects that say that you are not eligible, the project is not eligible or its tenants to apply for district permit parking in that area. And my understanding was that that was not something that was codified within Title 19. It was a condition of approval that we were using each and every time. Okay. Can you, I guess, explain maybe how this new red line language, does it relate at all to that discussion that we've had? I noticed that there is a major use permit review authority and a minor use permit review authority.
Yeah, this ordinance does not address that particular instance. Like if it wasn't codified, we're not addressing it in this code amendment. If it's something that's addressed as a condition of approval, then it's something that's done through the condition of approval process. So whether or not you are either
It's
unbundling parking
simply,
or
that discussion, it is simply a condition of approval. It is not codified, nor is it being codified by this.
yeah, and that condition, if I recall, is more to deal with on-street parking, and this is to deal with private parking, right? So it's sort of a slightly different beast altogether.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. And then the other point that I would raise, Commissioner Huben-Garner's points are well founded about the elderly and aging in place. I feel like it's a good time to mention that we have two services that the city offers that we pay for. It's free on weekdays, the city Dial-A-Ride Flex, and then on weekends we have an on-call transportation demand service that subsidizes about 85% of the cost. It's something that we do in West Hollywood above and beyond what other cities do, and I think it's worth mentioning in that context.
Thank you.
Commissioner Huben-Garner.
Yes. I would like to follow up on Commissioner Caballero's point, and I think he was following up on mine, and I think I'm just going to provide a scenario, and let's just see how this works. So you've got a rent-controlled, rent-stabilized apartment for $2,000 a month, and your landlord decides to unbundle your parking. And I appreciate what you've said that, they'd have to go through certain hoops to, because it's an amenity, and they would, have to redo their rent agreement to eliminate that amenity and presumably reduce their rent. So they reduce the rent $100. And then they turn around and start renting that unbundled space for $200. How does that work in our rent stabilization law? Because the law is, you can only increase rent X% a year, correct? So by doing that, you've now effectively increased the rent more than the cost of living. And second part to that question is, is that unbundled space purchased by a rent-stabilized unit occupant also rent-stabilized? This one
Yeah.
for the lawyers, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, we really can't answer hypothetical questions
Well,
about the
it's
rent
gonna come up.
stabilization law.
It's gonna come up.
And yeah, we can, and, our friends in rent stabilization can look into that, but
Well, but we're being asked to to vote for this and discuss this. This is a real scenario that I can see happening super easy. And then the minute one landlord twigs onto it, all the others will, and now all of a sudden you've got all of your rent-stabilized units losing their parking, being rented to commercial or being rented back to them at a higher rate than they're currently paying in their all-in rent. So that's scenario one. And scenario two is that said rent-stabilized parking space for that rent-stabilized unit holder now is no longer stabilized. And that rent could go up another $100 every year. So those are two pieces to this that I think haven't been addressed at all related to our rent-stabilized community, which is not an insubstantial portion of this city.
And Commissioner Hoopengarner, I'll say it's a good point. One thing I'll note about...
and to all the people out there, you didn't hear me say that. I'm not giving you ideas.
But one thing I'll note is just that this only applies to properties that are issued a certificate of occupancy on or after January 1st, 2025.
But witness the hundreds that are potentially going to happen just on projects that are in the queue right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a hypothetical question. We're talking about hundreds of rent-controlled, rent-stabilized units in the projects that that we're looking at, we just approved.
I mean, we've approved two since 1986, like two in the history of the city.
New projects aren't subject to rent
new construction, rent control.
What about affordable units?
That's different than rent control.
But they have the same, are affordable units prevented from being unbundled? Under this law, my understanding was 100% of them can be unbundled. Whether they're an affordable or rent stabilized, they can be unbundled, correct?
That's my understanding as well, that parking for new construction is unbundled from the actual space in new construction.
My question is, so it's 2025, project just opened, they are unbundled, but the building owner didn't do it, and it's part of the rent, it's part of the affordable unit. And we've had this conversation on this dais many times that, hey, what limited parking is available gets assigned, we did it on the Viper Room, gets assigned to the affordable units. Now, under this law, those can be taken away. And then potentially forced to be re-rented at a higher price.
Yeah, so just to just clarify, so no newly constructed units will be rent stabilized, right? It's all new construction.
Didn't we just approve one a week ago?
2
units in that building right there.
Affordable.
2 affordable plus 2 rent stabilized.
Deed restricted, rent stabilized.
Yes, in the building we approved last week.
So yeah, so the state law allows that, and it's allowed unbundling since 2024. So that is sort of like in the books, like now, really. So all we're doing is just making sure that our code is in alignment with that. With regards to whether somebody might be able to trick someone or move things around, like we, hope that won't happen. The regulation as is now is that, if something is deed restricted affordable, it actually falls under the overview of our, housing team, which includes rent stabilization as well as property development. So, there are some, I guess, checkpoints and regulations that should make that not impossible, but very likely very difficult.
Commissioner Harris.
Yeah, I had a quick clarification, and this is in response to Commissioner Hoopengarner's questions. I don't know the answer to all the questions, but I do know that for rent-stabilized units, the city maintains a list of the value of amenities that are connected to the units. I know because I had to deal with this. There was collective laundry in my building. There was one washing machine, one dryer, and the owner was doing work in the garage, took away those amenities for a number of months, and we contacted the city, me and a neighbor of mine, and we found out that the price that the city assigns to that is $30 per machine. So we were able to get a rent credit for the total of $60 for the time that was removed. I don't know the value that the city puts on parking, but I just want to clarify that there is an assigned value, and that wouldn't be up to the property owner or just left to the negotiations of the property owner in the case of a rent stabilized unit.
And my point is simply that it's being tracked, that it's being paid attention to, and that, again, back to, you can't, in your rent stabilized unit, the rent can't go up more than the CPI every year, right? So what about the related parking space? You're now being sold separately in an unbundled scenario. Is that also constrained by the CPI, yes or no? And that's what I haven't heard an answer to yet.
Can I ask a clarifying question to Commissioner
Yes.
Harris's question?
Jones.
Thank you. If parking was unbundled from a unit, and you would have to pay for it separately, would it still count as an amenity for the purposes of tracking? If you don't know the answer, that's okay.
Yeah,
I may have thrown
don't
up,
know the
but I'm
answer to
just
that,
curious
but-
to know if it's something you have to. I mean, laundry is like access to laundry. Like they're not going to let you do laundry for free. I think we would all love that. I know I
I
would.
can say that at the state level, parking is not considered an amenity.
It's not considered an amenity. So in theory, per Commissioner Harris's question, it would not be tracked.
At least, not at the state level.
Okay.
I'm not sure if West Hollywood has amenities, or if it tracks things like that for parking.
Okay.
As a rent stabilization commissioner for 17 years, my sense is that the city of West Hollywood will consider that parking space an amenity, and the landlord wouldn't be able to take it away without without the tenant being awarded a rent decrease. Commissioner Edwards.
I was going to say, but for under rent stabilization, it's an amenity. That's one bucket that we can regulate. But it sounds like if it's outside of the regulations of rent stabilization, then we can't regulate it and call it an amenity. I think that's the challenge that we have presented to us legally.
My concern is that we address it, that we pay
Well, I don't know
attention
if
to it,
we
that we make
can.
conscious decisions about it and not leave it in the abstract and leaving it up to a random decision that could be applied, inconsistently.
Well, I guess my follow-up would be, is that within the purview of the West Hollywood City Planning Commission when it comes to regulations under rent stabilization?
Well, it's not, just to answer your question, but it's also not inappropriate to make the comment and consider it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that we should have anything to say about, whatever code section is the rent control, but we're making decisions that's absolutely going to have an impact on that. So we shouldn't, we should at least be conscious of that and, making sure that we're planning for it, addressing it, and not just waiting until, oops, we forgot to think about this, and, now scrambling, and we've got, a bunch of upset renters on our hands, and Rent Stabilization Commission's got a whole bunch of people, on their hands. So that's my concern.
To clarify, I just want to know, legally, can we condition it versus we can make a suggestion and then it goes where it goes? That's what I'm trying to understand. Like, what is our regulatory requirement to move that question forward?
Well, This discussion and the minutes of this discussion will go forward to council as part of the administrative record in adopting this ordinance.
Any other questions of staff before we go into deliberation?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I guess, a clarifying question. In my reading and understanding, when it comes to unbundled parking, we're currently in conflict with state law, right? Since January 1st, 2025, new construction must unbundle parking per state law. Not that a property owner can choose to unbundle or not unbundle.
Correct.
So as it relates to future rent stabilized units, we entitled 2 at our last meeting. In 39 years, those are the only 2 that we've ever entitled. I'm sure that we might entitle 1 or 2 more, and if and when those units do come online, the parking will be unbundled from those rent stabilized units. Is that correct? Correct. Okay.
Great. Any additional questions of staff before we get into deliberation? I had just one question. One of the public comments today had asked about the involvement of the Transportation and Mobility Commission. Have they been involved in any of these discussions?
Yeah, no, typically the Transportation and Mobility Commission, they take a look at sort of streetscapes, transit, on-street parking. They really don't, their purview is not off-street parking. That's strictly within the zoning ordinance, which is the purview of the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you so much. If there are no other questions of staff, let's go into deliberation. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Solomon.
I will vote in support to move this forward. Thank you to Helen and Anita for coming and speaking. I wish more people had come to speak, but thank you to staff for putting this together for us too. The only thing that I'll add to this is on the exact same day that the staff report dropped, the UCLA Institute of Transportation Studies also dropped a paper on construction costs for minimum required parking. And this is just the construction cost, not land value at all, but the construction cost in Los Angeles for underground parking is $74,000 a stall. When you put the value of the land and factor that into it, especially in a dense place like West Hollywood, it's a $100,000 tax per parking spot to build one. So I believe in a future where we move away from personal ownership of vehicles. It's not something that I do. And I hope that more people move towards that as we move towards our climate goals. And frankly, it's just an easier way of getting around. So I am very happy. I've waited for this for a long time. I'm glad to see it come through, and I'll vote to support it tonight.
Who would like to go next? Vice Chair Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate all of the questions and clarification about this. I think I'm generally in support of staff's recommendation because I understand we're bringing this into compliance, our code into compliance with state law, but anytime we have to make decisions or deliberate about things like this, it's like I'm always trying to think about like what are we not anticipating? Like what could happen that we aren't thinking about right now that like may not be a condition of living in this moment or in 5 or 10 years, but could be a condition of living in like 20 years. And I don't totally know what that looks like. I think I understand the intent of unbundling parking, but, and this is my opinion, it is not going to affect my vote, but I want to say it for posterity. I don't love the idea of unbundling parking, if I'm being totally honest. Parking is going to become a more and more, I think, intensely demanded resource in our city. And I like to think that will be tempered with other kinds of public transportation and other modes of transportation. That is my sincere wish, and I feel like we're headed in the right direction, not just as a municipality, but as LA City and LA County. But, I mean, anybody who's ever been to the Grove or whatever, the Beverly Connection, and you're like, did I really just come to this place and spend like $20 to park for an afternoon? Because it is a resource. So I worry about the effect that will have on, I don't want to say affordability, but the cost of living in our city. That being said, I was doing some math on it, and I was like, okay, if somebody has a parking space they can rent out for, we'll say, like $200 a month. That's only $2,400 per year per parking spot. We'll say if it just stays at that amount. At $100,000, it would be like 41 years before anybody ever recouped their costs. So initially, I was like, maybe this would be an incentive for people to build more parking so that they could rent it out. No, I don't think it's going to do that. So I do have concerns about some of the kind of longer term impacts of this if things continue in the way that we're living today, which I don't think that they completely will because change is the nature of life. So I'm generally in support of staff's recommendations, but I do want to be mindful of the real life ramifications that policy like this will have on our city. And once again, I feel like people at the state level get to make decisions and like we're kind of left to work out the details. So I'm going to support the vote tonight, or the staff's resolution tonight, but those are my comments.
Commissioner Caballero.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Jones. I completely agree, and that's kind of, I felt like I was getting into the weeds, but again, given the last two Planning Commission meetings that we've had where, you know, I really understood that we need to think beyond what's in black and white in front of us, the impacts that it has on our community and how we, I understand that we need to come into compliance, but is there anything that we can do to support the impacts of this report on our community so that we have a good mixture of elements that support different age groups and people in our community? So I'm in support of this, but you know, my head is continually going back there to how is this going to impact our community? How can we mitigate some of those problems? What are the things that we can then supply to or provide to the community so that we can, that the quality of life isn't compromised?
Commissioner Harris.
Yeah, I'm unsurprisingly happy to see this item come before us and these zone text amendments. I think that sort of as a nation, we lost the plot with parking and how much space and resources we devote to cars a long time ago. It's just sort of become it's become a factor that has been able to define the makeup and the design of our urban spaces in ways that have really caused a lot of harm to all of us. Even the Coastal Commission acknowledged that in a memo, and that's saying a lot. I did want to address a couple of things that I looked up. So based on the latest census data, out of 22,708 workers in the city of West Hollywood, age 16 and older, 7,098 of them work from home, which is one of the highest numbers of highest percentage of workers working from home in the region. And so I think that a change like this really acknowledges it doesn't mean that people who work from home don't necessarily need to get around, but in general, in urban planning parlance, we think of the need to own a car as being very indelibly connected with the need to commute because it's connected with the need to access employment and education, general economic resources. And I think that we don't necessarily live in that world. And I think that that's probably here to stay. That exact number might fluctuate, but the idea that workers have the option of working from home is certainly a factor that I think is going to be around for a very long time. I also looked up the number of people, based on the latest census data, that are living in our community with a disability. And I'll provide a caveat there, of course. I don't think that the census data necessarily does. I mean, people have temporary disabilities that aren't going to get captured in census data, for sure. But this is definitely something that I personally think about as someone who has buried both of my parents, both of whom were sick for a number of years before they passed. It crosses my mind, right? Like, what does this look like in terms of quality of life for people who are living with disabilities? And what I found is, so this is out of the total pie, right? Of course, not just people who are over age 16 and work, but out of the 34,845 people who are occupants of West Hollywood, based on the latest census data, about 5,285 people identified as having a disability that is captured by census data. So a cognitive disability, a visual disability, an ambulatory disability. I think to Commissioner Solomon's point, I really do applaud. I mean, I talk about this all the time. Anytime that I have a chance to bring it up, I talk about how the city provides free and greatly subsidized travel options for people living with disabilities. I see the city line carrying people with disabilities through my neighborhood all the time, every single morning. I know that it takes people to different hospital appointments around the region, like Cedars-Sinai, and to the different adult day healthcare programs. So I really appreciate that. I also know that all Metro buses have to accommodate at least people whose disability is accommodated by being in a wheelchair. Again, that doesn't account for all disabilities, and I think that it's realistic that a number of people who are living with disabilities, for them that would not be an option. But to that point, I think that we have designed a world for a very long time that does accommodate people living with a personally owned, single occupant vehicle, AKA a car. So I think that, again, it's in general a good direction for us to move, to put the subsidy of owning a car on the people who choose to own a car, especially in one of the most transit-rich areas, certainly in our local region, probably in the state. I think that when people hear that you're removing parking minimums, that they think that it means that you're removing parking altogether. In general, the developers that I work with are obsessed with how much parking they can fit on a site. But what this does is it adds flexibility. It means that it doesn't kill a project. So that if you can't fit, say, 2 parking spaces per unit, that it means that you have no project at all, right? It means that you're saying, like, what can we fit that's going to be financially and physically feasible for the property that we're proposing? And then how do we tailor the marketing of these units so that we are still able to make a return on the building, make a fair return? And then in terms of ownership units, I have not convinced a single developer to develop condos or townhomes that do not have parking, because they recognize that market isn't going to buy a unit. If you're going to like take out a mortgage and purchase a unit and see it as an investment, in general, as much as I'd like for them to, developers just really aren't. They're not taking that step. I think that it's something that we can expect to have an impact on rents as our housing market grows healthier. I think that renters have more of a say in what they'll pay for a unit if it doesn't come with a parking space, and I think that that's generally a good thing. So I support the zone text amendments that staff has brought. Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards.
I will share that I support staff's recommendation because it aligns with City Council direction, aligns with state law, and I'm not going to repeat because a lot of wisdom has been stated here, but I do appreciate Vice Chair Jones' explanation of utilizing moral imagination about what the potential impacts could be, because I wish we had taken that position when we invested heavily in cars and we built out our entire infrastructure. If we had been more thoughtful about what would happen and what would be the cost of doing that. So I really appreciate the caution expressed by also Commissioner Carvalero, because it's a really good point. And I'm glad we're putting this down on paper to really think about the big picture and to say what if. So that way when these issues start to come forward, we have a record of that conversation and we be hopefully more prepared to act. Further to the whole parking issue, so I used to do land use consulting, and what I learned to my great frustration is that traffic engineers use this book about how you determine parking requirements, and it was usually based on studies that were like in Iowa around McDonald's, or it was just insane. And to put a further point on it, Councilmember Gruhl at the time said, when she was chair of the Transportation Committee, she said, we're going to correct this because I think the parking needs to be more. So we're going to do an internal study. That internal study was never released because they realized they needed less parking and she couldn't afford the politics of releasing that. So parking is a very interesting conversation, but I think some of the biggest challenges that we have around that conversation, it was a construct that was created that created this bias that's not really true reality, but we assume it's true. We try to frame everything around that truth. And so I'm glad we're moving in this direction because we can start having a better conversation about what parking is really necessary, especially in light of the fact that cars are becoming more and more and more and more expensive. That is almost in the best interest of what we're doing. Hopefully we'll incentivize more public transportation, and we're doing a good job of it locally because you can't afford a car. It's just getting way, way, way too expensive these days. And so this is a move in the right direction, and so I'll restate that I do support staff's recommendation.
Commissioner Hoopengar.
I'm going to support this simply because we really don't have a choice. But I do want to make some comments. I mean, you're talking to someone who was made an honorary member of the Sierra Club at the age of 14, that has advocated public transportation, in particular trains, which we are so far behind the world on nationwide, it's disgusting. But we're not there. And I think that, with all due respect, Commissioner Harris, 7,000, work from home, but we're talking people living in luxury housing who have luxury jobs. And so as a percentage of the workers in West Hollywood, they aren't working from home necessarily. The people who are working in West Hollywood every day are working in our hotels, our restaurants, et cetera. And there have been study after study after study that has shown that no, while the poor may take public transportation, more often than not, they have a car because they have 3 jobs. And they have to get between those jobs. And that requires parking. And that's a reality. LA public transportation does not afford them the ability to spend an hour and a half between each job. And that's reality, okay? Now, to the issue of trusting the developers. If that were true, and if we all believed that, we wouldn't have any zoning ordinances. We would just say, sure, come on down, build whatever you want to build. But we don't, because we know better. And we have guidelines, and we have priorities, and we have a general plan, because this is who we want to be. Now, the state continues to, rip the floor out from underneath us in terms of our choices. And we haven't chosen to push back on that. But one of the problems I've said, before, and I will continue to say, the state continues to enact not thoroughly well thought out laws that are one size fits all, that's trying to make Pomona and West Hollywood be treated the same. And we're not the same. And so I think it's very important that we do everything we can to Commissioner Caballero's point, protect the quality of life for our citizens. And and keep it so that they have mobility. We have a very hilly community, okay? I had a foot surgery. I had one of those scooters that our director has. I was confined to that for 4 months on a steep hill in my home. Let me tell you, I prayed every day the brakes on that sucker worked, okay? And that was just one incidence of one person. And the thought that, oh, just, you know, take public transport, just ride my bike, not an option, okay? And so on the day when everyone in these decision-making bodies can say that they've spent the last 90 days without ever getting in a car, that they've only used public transportation and they've only ridden their bike, we need to think about everybody who has to use their car. So, I really want to make sure, and I think my questions brought this to the fore, that we really do think through the impacts of all of these things, that we don't just gloss over it and hope, that we plan, that we prepare, and that we look out for all of our citizens. And we have a lot of young people standing up saying, oh, you know, yay, public transportation. That's great until you can't walk, until you've had that thing happen to you. And that's a large chunk of our population. So yes, I will be supporting this, but I'm not loving it. And to the case in point of our project last week, a case of luxury housing with no parking. To Commissioner Harris's point, no smart developer does that because they have to have parking in order to sell it. It's not a good business decision. But I've heard more than one architect saying, my owner is busy counting the dollars but not thinking about the long-term impacts and the long-term impacts of maintenance of the building, long-term impacts of the marketability of the building, et cetera. And I realize that's not staff's job to help them do that, but it's our job to really think and help make things better. And we do that at design review, and we try to help make these better projects. And so that is my mission all along, always, is how can we make it as good as possible? Thank you.
Great, I think everybody's had a chance to speak. I don't have a lot to add to what everybody has said. I obviously appreciate my fellow commissioners' comments about the city's going to have to look at the impacts of this in terms of livability in our city for people who need cars. Last 2 meetings, I've ranted somewhat about parking and how I think it could have a negative impact on our community if there's not adequate parking. So obviously the city is going to have to grapple with that in the month and years to come. And I note that we did have a project recently that didn't plan for, in my opinion, adequate parking. But state law doesn't allow us to consider that. I do support staff's recommendation. There was some discussion about rent stabilization and the impact on our rent stabilization ordinance. That's not within our purview, but in bringing this to City Council, staff should be prepared to talk about that, and rent stabilization, the department should probably look at and see if there's some sort of cleanup ordinance that might be needed with respect to our rent stabilization ordinance. But again, that's not before us today, and that's not our purview. If that happens, that would go to the rent stabilization department. That's it for me, and unless anybody has anything else, does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I made a motion to
Okay,
approve
we have a motion and a
as per the
second.
staff report.
If there's no further discussion, let's go to a vote.
And the motion passes unanimously with 7 ayes, approving resolutions number 26-1639 and resolution number 26-1640 as presented. There is no appeal process. This is a recommendation moving forward to the City Council.
Thank you so much. We do not have any new business, unfinished business, or excluded consent calendar items. Item 14, A and B, items from staff, planning manager's update and subcommittee management.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. Just wanted to give you a quick overview of the upcoming March 19th Planning Commission meeting and some other committees. At the next March 19th Planning Commission meeting, we are going to have a public hearing. The ZTA for qualifying housing projects is coming back. Some of the revised framework that was contemplated by the Planning Commission. So we will review that at the next meeting. We also have the office to hotel conversion project, that small little project over at 7494 Santa Monica Boulevard. That's the office space above Javista. And then there's also an additional public hearing for a subdivision at 7428 Santa Monica Boulevard. That's the Fairbank WeHo, next to Galangatai over on the east side. And then a new business item, which is a review of the recirculated draft EIR for the project at 9160 Sunset Boulevard, the Hornburg site. So that's coming before you at the next meeting. And just a reminder that the April 2nd Planning Commission meeting is canceled in observance of Passover. No items for the Long Range Planning Project Subcommittee at the moment. For Design Review Subcommittee, there are a couple of items. There isn't a Design Review Subcommittee for March 12th, but instead there's going to be a SASE meeting. So at that SASE meeting, there will be a review of the billboard at 8873 Sunset. That's northeast of Sunset and Clark, that intersection. So then following at the March 26th Design Review Subcommittee meeting, there are 2 presentations. One is for a project at 833 Westbourne Drive. That's a 6-story, 25-unit multifamily residential building. And then there's another presentation for 8760 Shoreham, which is a 22-unit multifamily project. That's, southwest of Shoreham and Sherborne. That is an AB 130 project, so just wanted to highlight that for you. And with that, that concludes our look ahead. Thank you.
Any questions for staff?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoopengar.
Is that 833 Westbourne, is that a builder's remedy? Yes?
It sounds like yes. Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Hearing none, thank you so much. Public comment. Mr. Gillig, any additional public comment?
Chair, I have received no public comment.
Items from commissioners. Vice Chair Jones.
Yeah, thank you. I did want to call out, I cannot be at the Design Review Subcommittee meeting on March 26th. I have to be in New York for work most of that week, which I just found out about, so I wanted to let you know as soon as possible, but I will not be able to be at that meeting. So just a heads up on that front. So I don't know, I think we're not doing alternates anymore, but I don't, I know it narrows it down, it leaves it to 2 people, so sorry. I have to be out of town for work. I also wanted to ask, and maybe this is kind of a weird question to ask, but David, do we get paid as soon as everyone signs the CHPP form? Is that how that works?
Yes, but
Okay.
not everyone signs it in a timely manner.
I know. Well, and that was going to be my request, and I can only speak for myself, but we're living in lean times right now. It is a difficult world out there economically. If everyone could just make an effort to make sure that they sign it as soon as possible, like it's already come to our inboxes, so if you can just make an effort to sign it as soon as possible, I think that would be helpful. I know it may not seem like a lot, but I think, again, I can speak only for myself, but it can mean a lot to other people. So I just wanted to make that request. And those are my comments. Thanks.
Any other commissioner comments? Hearing none?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoopengar.
I just want to make a point that, once again, I think we had a standing policy that the EIRs, when they're available, that they be sent to us straight away so we have time to review them instead of, with the, weekly package, because there is a lot in them. I happened to stumble across it, but having it sent to us would be really helpful.
Great, thank you. Good point. Anything else? Hearing none. At this time, I will adjourn this Planning Commission meeting to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which will be held on Thursday, March 19th, 2026, beginning at 6:30 p.m. until completion right here at West Hollywood Park Public Meeting Room, Council Chambers. We are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.
Along with her little brother Mishak, as the very first cat mayor for the city. She has a real hard job of making sure that people recognize that it's not just dogs. We know that there are many different animals that consume love, and while we certainly have dog parks and people walking their dogs out through the streets, we know that at home and in the hearts of community members all throughout West Hollywood, there are many different animals that take up our time.
Winnie is very excited to take this big burden off of her shoulders, and she could not think of anyone more